Arguably the most pivotal event in modern history, World War II saw mankind forced to evolve and accelerate for the sake of their own survival. The dramatic battle between Hitler and the Allies played out across every continent. This exciting series looks back across some of the most defining moments of World War II and brought to a whole new life now in color. The Second World War was the most destructive conflict in human history. Years of international tensions and aggressive expansions by Nazi Germany led to the invasion of Poland in 1939. Days later, war was declared on Germany. Hitler's ambitions for German expansion became increasingly evident throughout 1938. German troops marched into Austria on the 12th of March, and with the enthusiastic support of most Austrians, the country was annexed to Germany the next day. Hitler's open aggression went unchecked, as the United States and the Soviet Union were concentrated on internal politics at the time. Neither France nor Britain, the two other nations most devastated by the Great War, was eager for confrontation. In late August 1939, Hitler and the Soviet leader Joseph Stalin signed the German-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact, which incited a frenzy of worry in London and Paris. Hitler had long planned an invasion of Poland, a nation to which Great Britain and France had guaranteed military support if it were attacked by Germany. The pact with Stalin meant that Hitler would not face a war on two fronts once he invaded Poland, and would have Soviet assistance in conquering and dividing the nation itself. Polish resistance to German demands strengthened after Britain and France issued their guarantees to defend Poland's independence in March 1939. In April, Hitler ordered preparations for the invasion of Poland. He strengthened ties with Japan, the main threat to Britain's empire in the Far East, and in May, he signed a military alliance with Italy. There was little international resistance to this Anschluss, which many viewed as a natural union. However, Hitler's demands for the German-speaking areas of Czechoslovakia created a crisis that brought Europe to the brink of war in September 1938. On September 1, 1939, Hitler launches an attack on Poland, underestimating the start of World War II. For the first time, foreign leaders become aware of how insane Hitler really is. Hitler divulges this concept of blitzkrieg, a lightning war, to his German public. Within just 6 weeks, Poland is crushed by the German army, and tens of thousands of Poles executed.
In September 1939, Hitler invades Poland, along with Stalin. Soviet Russia also invades Poland at the same time. But what the world remembers is the fact that Hitler invaded Poland, and a couple of days later, the British declare war on Germany. But Hitler's advance through Poland was really quick. It was lightning quick. And actually, the German word blitzkrieg literally means lightning war. A lot of people say that the Poles capitulated very easily. To be fair, they didn't, but there was no doubt that Poland was overwhelmed by this superior force. And it was also a kind of new joined-up form of warfare in which you've got the air force and the ground forces talking to each other in a way that hadn't really been done before in an invasion. And you really can't compete, when you're facing this, newly remechanized armed force from Germany, punching its way all the way through. It was devastating. And then we see the blitzkrieg again in 1940, when Hitler turns his attention west and overruns the Low Countries in a matter of days. So Belgium, Luxembourg, Holland, they're just swept aside in just a few weeks. And then, of course, basically invading France. France is not a small country, and yet Hitler has the capability of being able to rout the French forces very, very quickly.
The shadow of the conquering German armies covered Western Europe. The self-styled master race was riding high.
A change dictated by one man, Adolf Hitler. In Berlin, on April 20th, 1938, 50th birthday of Germany's Führer, the world has a first glimpse of the new machine methods of waging war. Before its leader rolls an army forged in terms of 20th century mechanical science, an army whose whole striking power is based on the internal combustion engine. And as the armored divisions thunder by, the world sees in rehearsal the actual battle order in which these monsters of destruction are to be employed. First come heavy breakthrough tanks to drive through the opponent's lines, smash a path past barriers and traps. In their wake comes squadron after squadron of assault tanks designed to scatter opposition, mop up pillboxes, play havoc with communications. Behind again come motorized shock troops to hold the breaches in the lines made by the tanks ahead. Last in this revolutionary battle order march the infantry. But even here lies surprise, for among the iron-jawed veterans appear troops in a strange uniform, parachute harness. And while the tools of blitzkrieg rumble past, overhead drones a new artillery, Stuka dive bombers, more accurate than any howitzer. Significant of this German will to power is the story of the creation of the Nazi war machine through 6 intensive years of effort. When Adolf Hitler, demagogue and warlord, first became Führer, a world at peace told itself that a bankrupt Germany could never fulfill the Nazi dream of conquest. But in 1933, a new word came into the German language, Wehrwirtschaft, the organization of life for war.
Now, Adolf Hitler stood just as Napoleon had stood more than 100 years before, and looked across the English Channel to the one fighting obstacle that stood between him and world domination. The chalk cliffs of Britain rose out of the choppy waters. The fall of Austria, Czechoslovakia, Poland, Denmark, Norway, Holland, Belgium, and France had given him more than 100 million slaves to work for him or starve. "30,000 Jews are arrested and sent to concentration camps, where they'll see out the rest of their lives in torture and unlawful conditions."
Just as he had promised in Mein Kampf, Hitler is treating the Jews in Germany as an internal enemy. Even though a lot of Jewish men had fought in the First World War for Germany because they were Germans who just happened to be Jewish, as far as Hitler was concerned, the Jews were the enemy wherever they were, whether it was in Germany or anywhere in the world. And so what you see are laws stripping Jews of their German citizenship. You see awful things like Jews not being allowed to go to swimming pools, because if a Jew swam in a public swimming pool, the water would have to be drained because the Jew had dirtied the water. So you can see that you've got this sort of awful both political and cultural exclusion of the Jewish community.
The German people are unaware of the inhumane treatment that will take place in these camps, but are beginning to realize the severity of Hitler's anti-Semitism. Anyone inferior to the Aryan race does not deserve the mercy of Germany.
Hitler was well respected by many people within Nazi Germany, but I suspect that he was actually feared more than he was respected. I think there was a vast proportion of private German opinion that still saw him in the same way as those somewhat snobby Prussian officers regarded him as the little corporal. In many ways, Hitler was like a little man trying to make himself big all the time. And I think some people saw him for how we see him today, as a monstrous figure and as someone with this absolutely pathologically sick ego. But I think that certainly he was respected if you regard fearing someone as respecting them.
Hitler and his generals drafted their plans for the conquest of Britain. Every detail must be anticipated. A slip now might wreck the whole timetable of world conquest. Six weeks of final preparation went into those plans. 6 weeks to determine the history of 1,000 years. The plan was foolproof. The German plan for an invasion of England, Phase 1, knock out the Royal Air Force and its bases, get control of the air and the sea lanes across the Channel, and follow the blitz plan that had wiped out Poland, the Low Countries, and France. Destroy communication and transport lines. Above all, get command of the air. Phase 2, crush the coastline with dive bombers. Drop parachute troops to take over the airfields and establish beachheads. Phase 3, actual invasion. Pour the German panzer divisions into high-speed barges under an umbrella of protecting fighter planes. Then send spearheads of armed men to divide, surround, and destroy all opposition. That's all there was to it. Conquer Britain and force the surrender of the British fleet. Then, with the combined sea power of Germany, Britain, Italy, France, and Japan, he could control the seas. On the Channel invasion coasts, more than 100 fully equipped German divisions were singing the Nazi theme song, "We Are Sailing Against England," as they waited for word from Hitler. Here, for weeks, all the supplies and weapons of the Nazi war machine had been turned towards Britain. However, Britain also had an army, but it was an army dragged from the sea of Dunkirk, an army without weapons that had been left behind on the roads of France. Tanks, guns, and motorized equipment are all abandoned to save one priceless item: men. In all of Britain, there was not enough equipment for one modern division. Only one tank for every 1,000 square miles of territory. Only one machine gun for every 1,500 yards of the beach. Britain had a navy too, but it was scattered all over the globe, guarding vital food and supply lines. And the British knew it would be suicide to use their fleet in the narrow waters of the English Channel with the German Air Force in control of the air. Britain also had an air force. An air force outnumbered 10-1 by the enemy, both in men and machines. And then there was Britain herself, the people of Britain, who were to be terrorized and forced to surrender. Others worked, men and women alike. They worked full-time, overtime, double time, 40 hours a week, 50, 60, and 70. Hours meant nothing, fatigue meant nothing, until the government forced them to cut down hours because over-fatigue was hurting production, and when they weren't working, the men patrolled the moors for parachutists, blocked the roads, and rehearsed invasion defenses. For something had happened here the Germans could never understand. In a democracy, it is not the government that makes war, it is the people. The people had chosen Winston Churchill as their Prime Minister to lead them, and he spoke the words in every British heart when he said,
"We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall fight. Landing ground, in fields, in streets, and on the hills, we shall never surrender."
More mass raids on Britain. Whether it's blockade or nerve war or curtain raiser to invasion, nobody knows. But the Royal Air Force and the ground defences are dealing with it. As usual, the balloon barrage is the first object of the attacking force. Here's one direct hit. But the anti-aircraft gunners have the measure of these attacks. They reckon to bring down one plane for every 2 balloons. Still the Nazi planes come on. The famous German Air Force has a big reserve, but whenever they come out, the RAF reduce the odds. Soon we shall be ahead in quantity as we are now in quality. Once again, of course, they did some damage. But once again, the spirit of the people who have been under fire has proved unbreakable. Our cameraman at Croydon had a narrow escape when his car came into range of enemy machine guns. And here's the biggest thrill of the raid. A German bomber over a district in South London was brought down by the rifle fire of the Home Guard. In fact, taking it all round, it's a case of business as usual in Britain.
They knew that every man, woman, and child, in uniform or out, would be Hitler's target in the onslaught that might come at any moment. They knew they had a job and little time to do it. The young, the not so young, and the old. The clerk, the butcher, the farmer, and the member of parliament formed a civilian army, Britain's Home Guard.
With the arrival of the blitzkrieg, things began to move.
The name of the new force, which is now to be raised, will be the Local Defense Volunteers. In order to volunteer, what you have to do is to give in your name at your local police station.
And the answer was the Home Guard.
Even so, the police take no chances. Bona fides are carefully checked. The Italian roundup and the fifth column excitement called for an infinite amount of fast work and tact from all branches of the police. Just the weather for ice cream, too.
They started from scratch. Experience, equipment. Supplies were scarce, with only one shell to fire at each practice. The women of Britain refused to be left out. This was Britain in its darkest hour. The people knew they were in for the worst the Nazi mind could invent, yet they didn't panic or run away. They patrolled and waited, drilled and waited, worked and waited. They waited for the terror they knew was coming. Then it came. That's the sound that became part of the life of every man, woman, and child in Britain.
A scene becoming unhappily familiar in certain parts of London. Some residents of areas which have been receiving nightly attention from the raiders have formed the habit of queuing up for the best places in the shelters. It is a problem which is receiving the urgent attention of the government.
When a high explosive bomb falls, any building near is likely to be destroyed, and any house hit is sure to collapse. The rated supply of Anderson shelters is limited, but every householder can take measures for protection against blast and splinters. He can do the work for himself using scrap materials and earth. For any post office, you can get a booklet, Price Reference, which tells you just how to make your home an air raid shelter. To protect a window, fix an old door firmly across the lower half, inside and outside, first removing the glass, and fill the intervening space with earth. An earth barricade about 30 inches thick will protect your front door from blast. Cover earth with old lino to prevent rain washing it away. A similar earth rampart will protect a basement or area window. Note the old boxes and timber containing earth. The best way to protect a room from glass splinters is to stick curtain netting or old lace curtains on the glass itself. There are ample supplies of netting now available. This will not prevent the glass breaking, but it will stop dangerous splinters flying about. Spread the paste evenly and cut the material so that it overlaps the frame as well as covering the glass. A well-filled bookcase placed before a window gives good protection against blast and bomb splinters. Rig up one room in your house as a refuge room, a small room, and give it all the protection you can. A coal cellar is a good refuge. Make it comfortable. You may have to stay in it for a long time. It is up to you to take these precautions, not only to save your own lives, but to ease the work of civil defense forces. When the raiders' pass signal sounds, you will emerge safely, thanks to these simple safeguards which you can make for yourselves. The full instructions are in the booklet. Go to the post office and get a copy today.
August the 8th, 1940, and the battle for Britain has begun. Here come the Luftwaffe, in dozens of flights, hundreds of planes, bombers, fighters, dive bombers. Across that 21 miles of travel, that 8 short minutes of water. Their first tactics were to bomb convoys in the Channel, convoys loaded with food and munitions bound for the great port of London.
This was the effect of a time bomb that exploded in the grounds of the King's London home. It fell only a few feet from the palace building, close to the King's sitting room. The day before, the King and Queen had been visiting other parts of London which had suffered from bombing. The sympathy which they extended then has come home to them. Truly, this is a war of all the people. We're all in it. A bomb, released by a Nazi bomb aimer in a plane that is being chivied all over the London sky, might fall anywhere. And so it is that their Majesties are walking among the debris in the garden, just like other families in 100 homes today. But Buckingham Palace is not by any means demolished, nor for that matter is the rest of London. London is taking it on the chin, and in case there are any doubts upon the subject, here is a brief tour of the capital, recorded by TV News cameramen after nights of heavy bombing. But on this day, September the 12th, 1940, London is still smiling. A wide survey of these ageless buildings show scarcely any ill effects. In the last war, London was bombed by planes and zeppelins. Berlin remained untouched to the last. In this war, London is standing up to it once again. We shall defend this city to the last stone. We shall defend it street by street and hit back street by street. The spirit of London is as tough and as grand as the spirit of the British Empire, the spirit that will bring us victory. There'll always be a London. This was the great fire in the city of London, almost to be compared with the fire of London in 1666. Pictures that look like hell on earth. This is what the German Air Force has done to our beautiful London. We shall not cry about it. It's the German method of making war. Isn't it time that the citizens of Berlin, too, should know this kind of horror? Let them suffer what London suffers. Let us give praise to the men of the fire brigades, regulars and AFS. Every man was a hero, working under fire for hours on end. The world will see these pictures of a raid that was not aimed at military objectives, only at the things that men and women have loved for centuries. The churches built by Christopher Wren after the fire of London, the famous buildings of the Civic Company, the Guildhall. We can take even this, because we know that in the end we shall defeat these foul German brutes. Miraculously through it all, St. Paul's stood, in the midst of flames, and escaped destruction. Morning saw the wrecks of churches, St. Giles, St. Lawrence Jury, St. Bride's in Fleet Street, and the city's famous Guildhall. London's battered city cries out for revenge.
German fighters waited overhead for the defending planes of the Royal Air Force, the RAF, to appear. They didn't have long to wait.
The Battle of London is still on. Never before has any city withstood such a sustained attack from the air. Each day sees more damage done, but each day is a day nearer victory. For despite the injury that falls upon our lovely city, it isn't doing Germany any good. Our war effort goes on relentlessly. The spirit and courage of our people is as high as ever. The bombs have performed strange tricks. The carpet is untouched in a building wrecked. And in a room from which all floors and ceilings have disappeared, the mantelpiece still proudly displays Dad's inviolate picture. Look anywhere you like in London. The capital is carrying on. The heart of the empire is still beating with a steady pulse. Our great allies' humor and gallantry combine to beat the Boche. And all the while the German planes are paying top price for their fun. And all the while our bombers are blasting Germany and coming back again.
The RAF came facing odds of 6, 8, 10 to 1 and dove in shouting the old hunting cry, "Tally-ho!" Phase 1 of the Nazi plan called for the RAF to be knocked out of the air, but the men of the RAF hadn't read the Nazi plan.
All the German prisoners who have been along this platform on their way to prison camps were placed end to end. They would make Nelson's column look like a park railing. The point is that week after week, we are draining the Luftwaffe of its pilots and crews. We needn't begin to feel that the end is in sight yet, but we can feel that with each batch brought in, the noose grows tighter around Hitler's neck.
The RAF knocked 182 German planes out of the sky in the first 4 days. For the next week, the Germans attacked the coastal cities from the Thames River to Weymouth. Hitler paid off with 180 more planes. Then the Luftwaffe battered the great port towns of Southampton and Plymouth, trying for a knockout before the flow of supplies from overseas. The ports took a terrible pounding, but they couldn't be knocked out. Cargoes went on being unloaded, with the protection of the RAF overhead. Battling the Spitfires and Hurricanes in the air wasn't panning out, so Goering switched his primary attacks to the fighter airfields Dover, Deal, and Parking. Maybe he could destroy the planes on the ground. He bombed the airfields and hit the fields, but the planes were saved. Unlike Poland and the Low Countries, Britain didn't make the mistake of bunching its aircraft on the runways. The planes of the RAF were scattered and hidden, only a few on any one field, and those in the far corners. The Spitfires still went up to meet the enemy. In the first 10 days of the Battle of Britain, Goering launched 26 significant attacks to get command of the air and lost 697 aircraft. The British lost 153, and 60 British pilots bailed out.
Even when off duty, they're all ready for a call to action at a second's notice.
Come on!
185 raiders down in one day constituted a new record.
But in these 28 days, the Nazis lost 900 planes and their crews. The more they sent over, the more were shot down. The British Spitfire had proved to be one of the deadliest weapons ever put in the hands of man. If this kept up, pretty soon no more Luftwaffe.
The frantic Nazis had to pull a new one. They did. On October 6th, they changed to night attacks. Maybe that way they could avoid those deadly Spitfires and Hurricanes. Maybe that way they could crush the stubborn British spirit. Never mind control of the air. Never mind Phase 1, Phase 2, Phase 3. Now to concentrate on bombing the people themselves into submission and make them cry for mercy.
Hostile raids, sir.
Wasn't much help at night. This was just German bombs against British guts.
Harvey?
Hello, Jack.
Sound happy enough down there tonight, don't they?
Yes, they're all right.
The great docks of London were left roaring infernos. Homes were destroyed by incendiaries. Business blocks were aflame.
And still the people of London took it. Night after night, they burrowed underground.
The Royal Engineers walked among the ruins to complete the demolition. These pictures will shock you, but they are the unhappy accompaniment of a war that is waged by modern savages. There is only one bright side to them, but that is all important. It is the determination of all, already proved, to carry on despite the worst. The city men are carrying on their business among the ruins until they can find new officers. Britain will always carry on. Now the charge of gun cotton is being placed in position. Margaret Street as we knew it is no more, but London will always rise again.
The long-range German guns were getting hot, from throwing shells across the Channel. In public, Hitler assured the Germans, "Mr. Churchill tells his people that England will win, but I tell you that victory will belong to Germany." But in private, he sent for Goering, the boss of the Luftwaffe, and put him on the hot seat. Goering was told to do something and do it quick. So, on August the 30th, he ordered all-out attacks on inland aerodromes and industrial centres. Maybe he could knock out the RAF on the assembly line. And he adopted new tactics too, more fighters and fewer bombers. Or perhaps he just had fewer bombers to send. Anyway, those he did send were well protected. Fighters above high altitudes, fighters on both sides, soldiers in the front and the rear, fighters weaving in and out of the bomber formations. Britain, the winner of the first round, was ready. With higher morale and sharper defence, improved listening posts were set up all along the coast and warned of the enemy's approach before he left the continent. Hell's Corner. By sheer numbers, the enemy again and again broke through the coastal defences and reached inland to the airdrop, aircraft plants, munition factories and machine shops.
Of these civilian workers in the face of grave and constant danger has won a new renown for the British name. These men and women are worthy partners of our armed forces and our police. Of the walls of London may be battered, but the spirit of the Londoners stands resolute and undismayed. As in London, so throughout Great Britain, buildings rich in beauty and historic interest may be wantonly attacked.
In the months to come, the British were to suffer many such bombings and burnings. But a nation that calls on cold courage when hot courage runs thin may die, but it can't be defeated. The Nazis struck Britain with all their might. They leveled thousands upon thousands of homes and damaged millions of others. They killed more than 40,000 men, women, and children, and seriously wounded 50,000 more. But not one single Nazi soldier set foot on British soil. are not Hollywood sound effects. This is the music they play every night in London, the Symphony of War.
But the workers kept on working, and the RAF kept on flying. Behind their motors and machine guns, these few men with wings, alone in the sky, were shooting down more than the Luftwaffe. They were smashing the whole Nazi plan of world conquest.